I have the pleasure of introducing our first LEAPTalk, and that's Steve, class of 2015. And it's been really fun. It's been really cool seeing his talk evolve. Steve has always been a step ahead. When my talk was in brainstorm mode, his was written, and when mine was written, he was already memorizing. So it's no surprise to me that Steve is first up, and I think you guys are going to love it. So
when he says evolved, it means it was evolving up until right now. So we'll see how it goes. Quick poll, whose flight was canceled yesterday? Yeah. Who got here at 1 a.m.? Yeah, it's the best prep for LEAPTalk, so if you have LEAPTalk, just arrange to have your flight canceled. So it's Christmas Eve, and I'm sitting in the living room with my in-laws, and we've had a great day hanging out, enjoying each other's company, making cookies, and doing Christmas Eve family stuff. But it's evening time, and we're winding down, and we've decided that we're going to watch a movie together. And I think this is interesting because the probability of success of finding a movie that we can all agree on is low at best, because we're all very different people. And everyone's being polite, and nobody's throwing it out there with any force about what kind of movie they want to watch. So, me being who I am, I throw it out there. There's a new Alien movie that just came out, hit the new releases, and I want to watch it. And I kind of know this is setting up for something interesting, but I throw it out there anyway, and everyone unexcitedly goes along. So we watch the movie, and credits roll, and the first thing out of anyone's mouth is my father-in-law saying, "Well, that was stupid." So, something you should not do with your father-in-law is pick a meaningless argument. It's just not worth it, let it go. So instead, you should ruminate about it for a couple months, write a speech about it, deliver that speech to 100 people a couple thousand miles away. To be fair, the movie wasn't that good, but it got me thinking about imagination. It was a science fiction movie. He likes historical fiction, war movies, and things like that. So it's just difference in taste. But for me, it got me thinking about imagination, the value that we place on imagination in society. Does it have value outside of entertainment? Is it childish? And my fear is that some of us in this room think about imagination that way. That it's a luxury, that we don't need it, that it's really sometimes just a distraction from the concrete issues that we've got to solve right here and right now. But my contention is this: imagination has real value to us right here, right now, in the technology division of one of the world's leading companies. If we fail to embrace imagination and focus on imagination, rekindle imagination, then we're going to fail to lead in technology. So let's define it so we're all on the same page. According to Wikipedia, which is the authoritative source on everything, right? Imagination is the power of human thought to create abstract or specific images or concepts in the mind. I'll say that again. Imagination is the power of human thought to create abstract or specific images or concepts in the mind. Now, we all know we use our brains to problem solve, but what I'm going to talk about today is using our imaginations to problem solve. And kids are great at this. So I'm going to talk about kids for a moment, and then I'll talk about adults and how we interact with imagination. So, I want to make this point. Imagination is not for kids anymore. It never should have been, and I'm not sure how we got to this point where we view it that way as a society. But I think it may have done something like this. Kids are great with imagination. They have imaginary friends. They make these interesting associations between things that as adults, think, wow, I never would have thought about it that way. But they also lack self-control. So their brains are still developing. Their prefrontal cortex, where executive function lives, that's just another word for self-control. That's still developing. So executive function is what stops us from telling off our boss when we're pissed at him. It's, if somebody farts on an elevator and it's your executive function that steps in and says, okay, look at the doors with buttons or something, just don't acknowledge it and get out of this situation as fast as possible. So kids are still developing that executive function. So my 4-year-old daughter somehow learned the word butt crack. Not for me, of course. And she loves to say it in polite company. She doesn't get the distinctions of manners. And God forbid she actually sees someone with their pants hanging low. She's going to call it out, which is even more crazy. So she's still developing that executive function, that self-control of knowing what's appropriate in different times. because sometimes it's appropriate to sit back down. So we make this connection between lack of self-control and imagination and creativity, and link those things as childish. So we see this reinforced in different places like drug addiction and rock stars, or we have the stereotype of artists that flip from one thought to another without any linear progression. And we sort of, as a society, don't appreciate that. Sometimes we get that. So this stereotype gets reinforced, but it's actually not correct. So there's a study at the University of Minnesota, Dr. Stephanie Carlson, brain development researcher. She's concluded that executive function and imagination they actually reinforce each other as the brain develops. So for instance, if I'm a child and I'm holding a Frisbee in my hand, and all of a sudden this Frisbee becomes a steering wheel, and then I'm driving around the living room with this Frisbee, and my whole world becomes a racetrack. So it's my executive function that's actually maintaining that state of non-reality. It's maintaining that continuity and turning things, to be continuous with that imagined place. So kids use imagination to solve problems, and they use it to crash ideas together and see what happens. So they're willing to look at ideas from different angles and experiment with ideas. And for instance, when I was young, my younger brother, we all shared a room, my three brothers and I. He was 4 or 5, I can't remember exactly. And he woke up in the middle of the night screaming, blood-curdling scream. Obviously we woke up too. And he was absolutely panicked. Even when he woke up, he was still scared, this look of terror on his face. And the words out of his mouth shocked us because he said, "But how can a circle be upside down?" This isn't that. So this could be terrifying for a 5-year-old. He knows that when he looks at his toy truck, it looks one way, and then if he turns it upside down, it looks different. So when he has a circle and he turns it upside down, he wants it to be substantially different than a right side up circle, and he can't do it. And he's an elementary school math teacher, so I'm hoping he's figured it out, but I'm not sure. So he was using his imagination as a mental workspace to try and solve that problem. So as adults, we seem to lose this capacity a little bit. As adults, we have more experience and knowledge. Naturally, we've been around longer. And with that experience and knowledge, we build this set of assumptions about the world that we hold as truth. And when a new idea comes in, or we're exposed to a new idea, we evaluate it against that set of assumptions. This is called anchor bias. So we're kind of anchored to the assumptions a variable is true, and sometimes those assumptions may not be correct. So there's a chance that we're rejecting some really good ideas and accepting some bad ones. This is problematic. So it helps us survive, but it also can be a problem, especially if you're in a field where innovation is important. On the other hand, my father-in-law, we'll return to him for a second, he has a wealth of experience. He's a lieutenant colonel in the Air Force, retired, and for the last 15 years, he's been evaluating flight tech technologies for the FAA. So his experience and knowledge is absolutely critical to weigh things against. So when we propose a new technology to put on an airplane to the FAA, he's the one that says yay or nay. His anchor bias is exactly what keeps us safe when we fly. So anchor bias sometimes can be a really positive thing that helps us be safe and survive. But in a different context, in the technology division, where we're responsible for research, development, and innovation, we should embrace the idea of imagination to be able to solve problems from a new angle, to crash ideas together, to get over that hump of anchor bias that holds us back. So let's look at another story of someone we're all familiar with who had to use his imagination, his mental workspace, to solve a problem. So imagine with me a young Albert Einstein sitting at a smoky patent office in Bern, Switzerland. And instead of reviewing patent applications, as he was employed to do, he's scribbling equations on a notepad. But he looks frustrated, he looks perturbed, because he knows that something with this equation has got to be wrong. How could he explain even to himself the implications of what this equation is pointing to? How can the speed of light be constant no matter what? Does that mean time can be manipulated? Can space be compressed? How can a circle be upside down? So he appears to be staring blankly across the room, but it's because he's lost in a thought experiment. See, in his mind, he's standing on the front of a train, traveling at almost the speed of light, and in his hand is a flashlight, and he turns the flashlight on, points it forward, and that's when his whole world opens up to him. He goes back to scribbling equations, sits back in imagination, back and forth. Before he knows it, he's sitting alone in a dark room, because everyone's left for the day. So he turns on a lamp and goes back to work. See, in this case, he was forced to use his mental workspace to put real ideas, real concepts, into an imaginary workspace where the normal rules don't apply. He couldn't design an experiment to test that theory right at that moment. It was Einstein himself who said, imagination is more important than knowledge, because knowledge is limited to what we know, but imagination is unlimited. It's open to all that we ever will know. But let's not be intimidated. So this is Einstein. He's obviously cut above. Imagination as a problem-solving tool is not only for geniuses. So imagine a Neanderthal digging in the dirt, looking for roots. Looks at his bloody fingers, and looks up and notices a stick leaning against the rock, and that stick kind of looks like a hand. So he imagines moving the earth with the stick. Save a few fingernails. Now let's fast forward a couple 100,000 years. There's a farmer sitting on a tractor, and that tractor's pulling a plow, and the plow is pulling 20 rows at the same time. And there were thousands and thousands of iterations between the stick and the plow. And every single one of them required thought, a concept, an image in the mind, and then an action. So this is not complicated. We all do this problem solving. But we need to embrace it. We need to create a place where it's safe to do this. There's a study at Dartmouth that shows that when we are engaged in imagination, our whole brain is being used. So the neurons, synapses across every hemisphere of the brain is fully engaged. We used to have this concept of right brain, left brain people. So right brain were the creative types. They use their right brain more dominantly. Left brain was the linear, mathematical side. But we now know that our whole brain is being used. So we can actually, and the study also implies that we can actually get better at using our imagination, our whole brain, and that creative capacity as a problem-solving tool. So not only can we get better at it and use it as a muscle, we should create an environment where we are open to other people using it. It should be a safe place in research to bounce ideas off each other without having our anchor bias shut it down immediately. So earlier this year, NASA made news because they were developing something lucid that would warp drive. Pretty awesome. And then the blogosphere immediately fired up, some scientific journals fired up. People said, this is ridiculous. Why would they spend any money on this? That's impossible. It will never happen. But I'm glad they were thinking about it. I'm glad somebody's thinking about it, and I think we should be too. Why? Well, for starters, because warp drive is awesome. But more importantly, today's science fiction is tomorrow's science. And this has been true for a couple 100 years. If nobody's thinking about it right now, we will never get there. Today's science fiction is tomorrow's science. So in BRT, we have Horizon 1, 2, and 3 technologies. Horizon 1 being near term, 2 is midterm, and 3 being 15 and 20 years out. But I'd like to think of science fiction as Horizon 4, 5, and 6. It's where we don't have the exact science to run an experiment right now, but we can use extrapolation, our imaginations, our mental workspace to solve problems that may lead to that next world-changing or galaxy-changing concept. People say think outside the box, but if you practice imagination, there is no box. So let's act like children. Thanks.